Fungi are placed in 5 phyla and share ancestry with kingdom Animalia due to both the presence of carbohydrate chitin in fungal cell walls and arthropod exoskeletons, as well as the ability to store glucose as glycogen, and finally, sharing ancestry with choanoflagellate protists. Historically, there was a sixth phylum called Deuteromycota, which was a convenience phylum for fungi with no observed sexually reproductive stage. Now, with molecular techniques, even those types are now placed in the existing 5 phyla. The first is phylum Chytridiomycota, known as the Chytrids. Chytrids are largely aquatic and are particularly common in freshwater environments. They are the oldest group of fungi, existing as far back as 500 million years ago. Members of this group are the only fungi that can produce motile cells. Most chytrid species produce spores that swim to new habitats via a flagellum. Many chytrids can digest cellulose and have lifestyles ranging from decomposers to parasites to mutualists. Some chytrids are the only fungi to exhibit alternation of generation. Chytrid disease, a terrible disease, has been happening and first discovered in 1998. Due to warming climates, spores of chytrids have been able to invade various parts of the world where many amphibians have been found. What happens is chytrid spores end up into the integumentary system of tadpoles, and as tadpoles metamorphosize into adult animals, frogs and salamanders, they suffocate. That's because salamanders and frogs tend to breathe through their skin, and these spores tend to block the ability for oxygen to diffuse across the skin. This next phylum is Zygomycota, also known as the conjugated fungi. All members of this group have choanocytic hyphae, meaning that the cells are multinucleated and, except for the zygote, the fungi's life stage is haploid. Rhizopus stolonifer, or black bread mold, is one of the most commonly studied members of this group. This species grows on spoiled breads, fruits, and vegetables. All zygomycetes, the common name for this group, reproduce asexually by producing sporangiospores. These are easily seen as the black tips on bread molds. Sexual reproduction begins when two separate strains of mold, positive and negative, fuse membranes in a process called karyogamy. Once fused, a diploid zygosporangium forms from the union of both, and it produces zygospores through meiosis. Zygospores are resistant to drought and temperature extremities and will germinate into a new organism when conditions are favorable. This form of sexual reproduction is called conjugation, which gives them the name conjugated fungi. Most fungi belong to phylum Ascomycota. All members form an ascus, which is a sac-like structure forming haploid ascospores. All members produce hyphae that are separated by septa, making them multicellular but streaming of cytoplasm between cells. During asexual reproduction, ascomycetes make stalk-like conidiophores, which make haploid conidiospores. During sexual reproduction, two separate strains of the same species, the male makes an anteridium and the female makes an ascogonium. These combine by the plasmagamy, but the nuclei don't fuse yet, causing a 1+1 or dikaryotic nucleus. After a while, a fruiting body called an ascocarp forms with a layer of several asci, single version ascus. Each ascus fuses the dikaryotic nuclei into a diploid zygote. Next, the zygote ascus releases haploid ascospores, which form into new mycelia in the environment. The sac fungi encompass many species of human importance. Saccharomyces cerevisiae, or baker's yeast, is responsible for the safe fermentation of breads, alcoholic beverages, and cheeses. Truffles and morels are fungal delicacies of this group, and morel hunting is a popular pastime for many people across the United States. Like other fungal groups, some can cause plant and animal diseases, whether primarily or by producing toxic secondary metabolites as a result of growing inside of crops. Ergo is a fungal disease that infects wheat and rye, but also causes ergo disease in humans if consumed. Some historians believe that some of the women involved in the Salem witch trials were wrongly accused of witchcraft because of an ergo infection. Phylum Basidiomycota, the club fungi. All members of phylum Basidiomycota possess a basidium, which is a microscopic reproductive club-like body that produces basidiospores. Most of the mushrooms we are familiar with are members of this group. Again, mushrooms are just the reproductive fruiting bodies of these species. Many species have gills, which are compacted hyphae that house the basidia. Alternation of generations exists in this group, with the majority of this group's life in the haploid stage. Mycelia are either haploid or dikaryotic, with dikaryotic being more common. Sexual reproduction is dominant in this group and begins with spores forming mycelia of one strain and eventually undergoing plasmagamy with another strain to make dikaryotic mycelia. These dikaryotic mycelia eventually form a reproductive basidiocarp, or mushroom, that appears above ground. In the gills, the dikaryotic mycelia fuse in the basidium to make a diploid zygote. This zygote then makes spores by meiosis. They are released into the air or by brushing onto an animal. Mushrooms, self-fungi, smuts, and rust are all members of this group. Edible fungi such as white mushrooms, portobello mushrooms, and shiitake mushrooms are used in different cuisines. Several poisonous mushrooms exist which can result in hallucinations, to coma, and death. Amantia phalloides, also known as the death cap mushroom, can kill within hours without medical treatment, and it looks just like any other edible mushroom you can find. Be careful eating wild mushrooms. Next is the imperfect fungi, which include both members of Ascomycota and Basidiomycota, in which an asexual form of reproduction has only been observed. Historically, even in many biology textbooks up until recently, Phylum Deuteromycota was a placeholder phylum for any fungi in which a sexually reproductive life cycle has not been observed. Now, due to molecular techniques, we can classify all members of the former groups as members of either Ascomycota or Basidiomycota. Many molds are part of this group. Molds are the result of fuzzy and visible mycelia. Roquefort and Camembert cheese is the result of fungal growth which provides flavoring. Penicillium molds are famous for making penicillin antibiotics. Many other species cause food spoilage. Finally, Aspergillus molds are the source of many toxic fungal substances. The newest phylum that exists contains around 230 species, all of which act as mycorrhizae, a symbiotic relationship between a glomeromycotan fungus and plant roots. This benefits plants by helping plants increase their surface area for absorption of minerals in the soil, and plants provide sugars to the fungus. One exception is Geosiphon pyriformis, which hosts a nostoc cyanobacterium as an endosymbiont. Thus far, no member of this group has been observed to reproduce sexually, and they can't survive without the symbiotic relationship with plants' roots, which is a good transition into our next video, the ecology of fungi.